Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the full council meeting for Tuesday the 16th of January. And first item on the agenda, item 164, apologies for absence.
I've had apologies from Councillor Humphreys.
Right. Do we accept the apology from Councillor Humphreys, who's away
Still on holiday.
on the other side of the globe?
Australia.
Disgraceful.
So that's accepted.
Good luck.
165, declarations of interest. To receive and consider any declarations of interest from members and officers under Section 50 of the Local Government Act 2000 and our Standing Order 35. This requirement applies only in respect of matters which are to be considered by the Council at this meeting. 16501, to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests. No. 16502, to declare any other interests. No. 16503, to consider any requests for dispensation. No. 16504, to report any gifts or hospitality accepted over the value of £50. No. And 16505, to report any inappropriate gifts or hospitality offered. Again, no. 166, minutes of previous meetings. 16601, the proposition to approve and sign the minutes of the full council meeting held on the 19th of December 2017 as an accurate record. Our Standing Order 10C.
That's the top one, yeah.
You've got them in your pack. If anybody is prepared to propose those, who was there?
I'll propose them.
Councillor Peel. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Glenn. Those who were there in favour, please. And I think that's everybody. So I'll quickly sign those. Right, and the next item is the 16602 proposition to approve and sign the minutes of the Neighbourhood Plan Full Council meeting held on the 2nd of January 2018 as an accurate record. Again, our Standing Order 10C.
I've just noticed I'm not on the list of those present. I was.
On this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So just-
We will amend that.
Will you put that in?
Do you want to add in?
On here you are present. Councillors R. Sparks, D. Chappell, V. Chesser, J. Hutton and P. Peel.
No, not on the version I've got.
There we go.
Oh, I'm the wrong one.
Got the right
Are you
name.
reading the
Have
plan?
you got the previous one in front of you?
Ah, I've got the planning one. I haven't the planning one on the same line. Sorry, my apologies. Easily done. Yeah, 2 meetings.
So, I thought you were going to propose them there for a minute. Do I have a proposer for those minutes? Councillor Chesser, a seconder, please. Councillor Chappell, those in favour of those who are present. Anybody against? Any abstentions? Right.
No, I was putting mine somewhere
Just
else.
waving or
The only thing I'd like to say about the minutes on the
Yes.
is that I was supposed to do an MP leaflet.
Yes.
Presented tonight. I have done it, but unfortunately we didn't have time to put it into the minutes for tonight.
Right.
The agenda was already out when he said he'd got it, so I said we'd bring it along to the 6th February Neighbourhood Plan meeting.
Okay.
Unless anybody would like to see it tonight.
I'd quite like to see it. We'll agree it at the
Yeah.
meeting on the
I
6th.
can
But
give it the end of the meeting.
yeah, if you
have a
can
quick
get it to
shot,
people,
yeah.
that would be great. Right, the next is item 167, public participation from interested parties or members of the public for a maximum of 15 minutes. Any comments? No? And there being no public, we're going to have no participation. 168, consideration of requests from interested parties. We've had no considerations either. Councillor Peel.
As we've got that 15 minutes, shall I just hand the front page of this round?
You can if you wish, yes.
Save such time later, wouldn't it?
Yep.
Because we are supposed to be sort of... now, this is only the first front page, because I didn't quite have all the dates sorted. And you've got to excuse the pixelation because I actually blew it up. This is an A5 leaflet, but I blew it up so everybody can see it. So if I start with you, you can pass yours that way. I'll start with you, and you can pass yours that way.
Oh, Kitchener's out again then.
I actually chose Kitchener because of the command and directness of it.
Yeah.
But the pink and the blues at the background, that was the command warning situation. And the pinks and the blues at the background are supposed to be warming and comforting.
Yeah, it's good.
So it actually gives both those thoughts to people as they look at it.
Softening feelings.
What's not gone into that?
So you've not just stuck a picture of
It's the
Kitchener
same
on
one,
it?
is it going
Right,
round both
so
ways?
yeah, it's the front page.
Right.
So then, like the other information will then be in...
On the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, because obviously it's double-sided. But
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they have just dates and things like that. So the pink and the blue will be on the back and then the dates will be on top of it.
So is that supposed to be A5?
No, what I did, just to so that people could see it, I blew it up to that side, but it's supposed to be on an A5 leaflet, which is what we said, an A5 leaflet is going to either the Dean Valley News or the Annual Advertiser.
So that goes on the front. That goes on
Sorry?
the front. That goes on the front. What goes inside? Just the dates of the
No, all it is a two-sided leaflet.
Right.
That and the dates on the back for the meetings.
The only thing I think we should add is that it's very important people do participate, because without a plan, we'll be run roughshod over by developers.
Well, I was hoping
And
that would actually...
that's something that
bring
came out
people
of
in.
it, I think the meetings that we've had, the workshops and so on, that people come here aggressively, oh, we don't like the plan, you know, why do we need one, all that sort of thing. They're likely to vote it down, unless they explain, in a referendum, and we've got to get the point across that they have to participate at this stage, and they basically have to vote for it, otherwise, you know, we're going to...
Well, the idea of the leaflet was literally to get people to come to the meetings. Because I just thought,
But you know, a lot of people won't,
yeah, no, well, look,
and they don't know why
we're
they
not going
should.
to get everybody coming in anyway, but
No.
the idea is just to get people into the meetings.
I just wonder on the back, we need a few sentences which says why it's important for people.
Well, we can put those on.
Yeah,
We can put those on, including the dates of the meeting. It's just that,
yes.
say, I was trying to grab people's attention.
I think it does.
Then
I think it
on the
does.
back, it should say why I should go. If you don't turn up, then this means you're leaving Oundle open to developers.
Yeah, something like that,
Develop
yeah. Simple statement.
If you vote for us, then you get a plan thing which gives you access to
Yeah, that's fine.
Then if you participate, you can get the plan you want.
and benefits.
If you can, in fact, if you can sort of just put a few lines together,
Yeah.
Okay.
and I can design it on the back
What
with
you've
the
got to be
dates.
careful is not to give people the impression, however, that some sort of vote is going to take place at or after any of those meetings, because that's not the scenario.
Well, we don't
So
have to, we
yes,
don't
we
have to
want
use
their
a vote.
feedback,
Yes.
so that the plan that they get to vote on is the plan that they want to support.
Yeah, okay.
That's the message to get over, it seems to me.
But if they don't vote, they're
If
in
they
trouble.
don't vote at all, then you're going to have a problem.
Yeah,
Well, we've got to keep it very, very simple and sharp. Like,
Just say, if you
yeah.
can do, if you can sort of send us a
I think
few
so,
notes,
yeah.
Malcolm, I'm quite happy to put on the back.
Sorry. Okay.
Now,
okay.
just before we close this,
Yes.
because we've got to move on,
Sorry.
before we close this, the brief that marketing were given, and marketing knocked together a leaflet, and Emma and I completed it. We were asked to give them a leaflet showing the bare bones of the plan. So we actually had 4 pages showing a few brief paragraphs on housing, just the table of where the housing developments were going to be, the green space stuff, and again, what you're saying, the dates and times of meetings and other relevant information.
So we put that on a full-page leaflet with this on the front?
Whether that's a separate thing, we put that out as a separate thing.
I'm quite happy to sort of make it bigger, if you like, and do an A4 with the information on the back. It was just that we said we were going to put it in the Oundle Advertiser and the Valley News. Well,
Yes.
the Oundle Advertiser is an A5.
A5, yes.
So what I worked to was an A5,
Yep.
so it would go in both.
That's what we said, A5,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and there's only a certain amount of information
Yeah.
you can put on the back or the front, and I just thought the front would more grab people's attention, and then hopefully bring them in. But if you can sort of suggest words that we can put on the back or make it an A4, I'm quite happy to do that.
Yeah.
You know,
It's
it's just
A4 folded into 4 pages on this list.
Sorry?
Four page A4 folded into 4. Like that. So it's 2 A5.
Yeah, we can probably try and do that, yeah.
Okay, we'll press on. The next item is 16901 Mayor's Report. Since the last full council, I've been involved with the Neighbourhood Plan and Planning Committee meetings. On the 5th of January, I went with Councillor Heather Smith of County Council to Market Deeping to look at a community library there, which may be a model for the way that county are going with medium-sized libraries in Northamptonshire. And that was a successfully run library, and it may be something that we can consider as an option to the way the library is currently run. But that all depends on the decision now from county as to what they're going to do with our library, which we won't know till 22nd of February when Cabinet meets. On the 8th of January, the Clerk councillors Glenn Hutton and myself met with David Wilson Holmes, who are one of the developers under the neighbourhood plan, and we went through their proposals. Also on the 8th, I had a meeting with Danny Moody about a variety of ongoing matters to keep him appraised of what was going on. On the 9th, the clerk and I held staff interviews, and we filled the vacancies for the Administration and Communications Officer, which is a shared post now, and also the Administrative Assistant's post. Also on the 9th, a number of councillors and myself and the clerk attended a meeting on maps with some of the working group, looking at the maps to be included in the neighbourhood plan. And again on the 9th, I had the Finance and General Purposes Committee. On the 10th, councillors Hutton, Glenn, the clerk and myself met with Bletsoe to discuss another development site within the plan. And on the 11th, Councillor Glenn, myself, the clerk and Paul Smith went through the budgets, and we had a very successful session of working through the budgets, which we're going to come to later this evening. Also on the 11th, early evening, councillors Hutton, Glenn, the clerk and myself met with the Peter and Anne Miller, who own Miller's Field, which is again another development site under the neighbourhood plan. And later that night, a number of councillors and myself and the clerk attended the public meeting at the Queen Victoria Hall for the neighbourhood plan. On the 12th of January, the clerk and I and Councillor Peel attended a meeting on drugs, on the problem of drugs in schools, predominantly in young people, I should say, rather than in schools, because it's happening outside of school, in Oundle. and on the 13th I attended a data protection course at the Checkered Skipper at Ashton. On that same day, on the 13th, I attended with Councillor Glenn a neighbourhood planning surgery in this room, and it was absolutely packed with people and a very successful session there, telling quite a lot of people what's going on the neighbourhood plan. And last night Councillor Glenn and I ran a neighbourhood plan surgery in the Barnwell room, and again a very good session, although numbers were much smaller. And that's basically what I've done since the last full council. 16902 District Councillors report. We've got no district councillors, and they've sent us nothing.
No
I presume.
apologies either.
No, I think they've decided they're not coming to our meetings. They did ask some while ago that they be part of the council and they sit up here with us and join in with us. But it's up to you whether you want them to do that. But they are district council, we are town council. It's up to you whether or not you want them to join us as equivalent of town councillors. But that's what they've been, that's what they would like to do. Councillor Peel.
Only if we can sit in their meetings as well. District councillors.
You have no hope of doing that.
I would
Councillor
say- I
Chappell.
would say no.
It's absolutely unacceptable. We are an elected level of government.
Yes.
People can't just turn up and join in because they feel like it. They have to be a member of the council to have that privilege.
Yeah.
They serve the community, we serve the community, we invite them to come along and tell us things that they think we ought to be hearing. And frankly, it's very disappointing if they can't be bothered to either turn up, provide a written report, or at the very least, come up with an apology. And I think we should be writing to say that we're very unhappy that that's the situation.
Very disappointed.
They could even send a brief report which we could read. Either the
Yeah.
clerk or myself could read a brief report on their behalf,
Yes, I think we can't.
just to brief us on what district are doing. Councillor
Why all of a
Oakes.
sudden have they said that they think they should be sitting here after all this time?
This is something that I had a meeting with Councillor Vowles shortly after I became mayor, and he said he'd like to talk about how we could work in closer cooperation, and it was one of the things he came up with and said it was a thing that all three of them had thought. When they go to some of the parish councils, I believe when they go to places like Bennyfield, it's a much smaller operation. There's only the councillors generally and sometimes a district councillor there, and they let them sit with the
With them.
council then because there's no one else in the room. So that's where they've got it from, I think, is
Okay.
from parishes. There are some town councils where the district councillors are also town councillors. There are about 4 or 5 of the Rushden district councillors are also town councillors. But they are elected to both. They are entitled to be on both. If they're elected to both, then they can serve on both. And there are some who serve on town, district and county. So they are entitled to do that as well. But if they don't stand for town council and get elected, either opposed or unopposed to town council, then the feeling here seems to be that they shouldn't join us.
I
Just
agree.
add to
Councillor
that,
Chesser.
over the years, this is the only time, these last few years, that we have not had a town councillor who's also a district councillor or county councillor.
Right.
So that's what we've been, but as you rightly say, it's the position that you're elected to that you're representing at that particular meeting.
I think as well though, when they are, if you get that, so you've got district councillors that are either county and town or parish councillors as well, whenever they are at a parish or town meeting, they are a parish or town councillor.
Yes.
They're not a district
Oh,
councillor
yeah, yeah.
who's sitting on there, and
No.
they need, there is a difference.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
they want to
Councillor
work
Chair.
closer with us. There are 4 vacancies in this council.
Yes.
3 of them.
Yep.
And I
Yes.
say,
It's a very good idea.
Yep. And I think possibly all 3 would be eligible. I think they all live within the distance. Certainly, Councillor Reichel
so Rysol
is in Oundle itself. So.
Councillor Niles is in Cotterstock, Councillor Stern is in Barnwell.
Mm.
Yeah.
Borderline, but probably allowable.
Okay.
We move on to item 170, signing and sealing. Would somebody like to read the resolution for me, please?
Shall I read it?
If you wish.
It was only you looked at me.
Before you got them,
Resolution.
I'm always lending her glasses.
That any 2 councillors and the proper officer may seal any document required by law to be issued under seal on behalf of the council. Standing Order 14B.
So that's a proposition from Councillor Oakes, seconded Councillor Chesser. Those in favour?
Be a bit difficult.
Everybody? Town matters. 171, Town Matters 17101, to receive an update on the review of Northamptonshire libraries.
So there isn't a lot, other than I just thought we would, the email that I sent out would have got the valuation on. We've had that since the last meeting, which I think I did circulate to everybody, and it's obviously higher than the original quote that, well, not quote, the original,
240,000, yeah.
by about 50,000. So
I-
other than that, when you went to the,
I went to this library at Market Deeping, which is, the number of visitors they have is about half of what we get. They have one part-time person who is paid. They're paid 24 hours a week to act as a supervisor of the other volunteers. The rest are unpaid volunteers, and they've got quite a lot of them who fill in and do whatever is required, whatever number of hours are required to keep the library running, and it seems to work extremely well. They have their library core service, the bit that First for Wellbeing provide here in Northamptonshire. That service is provided by a company called Greenwich something or other, Greenwich Library Services or something of that order. But they started in Greenwich in London with the libraries there. They've now expanded. They're now running the library services in Lincolnshire and Dudley in the West Midlands, and I believe some other places as well. But they were the 3 that they mentioned on our visit. I think they're slightly more expensive than First for Wellbeing, but they also seem to be a considerably better service than we get from First for Wellbeing. So it remains to be seen. They're going to quote Northamptonshire, so we'll see what comes out with that as to who runs the core service. I had an opportunity driving there and back. There were 2 of the friends of the library with us. I had the opportunity really to quiz Heather about what was going on lots of things. She didn't really want to comment on libraries, saying it was really Sylvia Hughes as the Cabinet Minister in charge of libraries. She was taking us to Deeping because it was a similar library to Oundle, a very similar type of place, similar population and everything else, and she was really wanting to represent Oundle rather than county by taking us there. She said the decision was with Sylvia Hughes as the cabinet member, sorry, mustn't promote them to minister, cabinet member for libraries. I did quiz her and say, I get the feeling that you are looking for money, you're desperate for money, which she confirmed. We all knew it anyway. And she did confirm that she thought that they might be looking for some way that we could contribute. We don't know what's going to happen with medium-sized libraries until they have this cabinet decision on the 22nd of February. It might be they leave medium-sized libraries alone. If they don't, it looks as though they might want us to buy the library, which is what they're asking all the small libraries to do. They're asking the local councils to buy their library. At the finance meeting, I did come up with some figures for purchasing the library on a public works loan, and there again in the budget I've got some numbers for you to think through. But we, and all the other services, Heather was not certain what was going to happen with these other services. I was given the name of a cabinet member for highways to talk about road gritting, weed killing, potholes, road sweeping and all the rest of it. I haven't contacted this person as yet, but it may be that we need to ask them whether they've got any figures at all they can help with. Heather is pressing them for figures, but nothing has come through since that meeting. Councillor Peel.
Can I ask, because obviously the county council looks as though it might be going into special measures.
Yes.
With actual civil servants taking over the roles. Are we in a situation really where they can't make any decisions until this inquiry is over and done with?
That's very possible. That may have overridden the earlier plans. So it might be that that cabinet meeting will now not be able to act until the government have given their verdict on it.
Yeah.
So we might have to wait even longer. But I don't think we'll be one of the first to pick up a library, but we have, when we look at budgets, we've got to think about what provision we make, assuming that we may end up picking up libraries, even if it means we run a surplus next year and we put that surplus into reserves and then talk about a smaller precept the following year. I did find out from Sian Matthews on Saturday at this data protection course that we are only going to avoid precept capping for another 3 years, and then we're going to be capped. So I think it's important that we get our numbers right in the next 3 years, because if we're then stuck with a 2% increase to our precept, we've got to make sure that we've got everything covered and we've got sufficient money to run the services we want to run before that happens. Because once it happens, if all you can do is increase by 2% and you've undercooked it, you're in trouble. Councillor Hutton.
Did we get any financial information on the Deeping Library's running costs?
Not really, no. I think anything that's come through is going straight to county.
So we didn't ask for it all?
We asked lots of questions about how much it cost. They were very reluctant to give us actual figures there.
When it been in the public domain, isn't it in there?
Sorry?
Isn't it in the minutes of their councils? Isn't it in the public domain anyway, the budget for Deeping?
It may be available from Lincolnshire
maybe I'll
somewhere.
find it on their website.
Yeah.
I just think we one more bit of information, so we have so little information of what the running library might cost.
Councillor Oakes.
The issue is whether we're going to start picking up everything that's going to be falling down from government. That's the, to me, all this is just, we're tiddling around at the edges. So we started off with the labs, we're now going down to the libraries. We're looking at, sort of filling potholes in, and it all of a sudden these people who are up there have been boasting. They have been boasting about the fact they've not increased their precept. Aren't we wonderful? We've not increased our precept, but oh boy, hello, Handel, you take this one over. What else are we going to be asked to pick up? Hey, this is, for me, this is a pretty fundamental issue of central government and how funds, which the government have through income tax, VAT, petrol tax, you name it, whatever, but all of a sudden it's now down to us. Now, I'm getting a bit narked about this.
You may get quite a lot more. And the reason I say that is the clerk and I went to a meeting last year, back end of last year at Daventry, where Danny Moody, it was an NCALC meeting, and Danny Moody displayed a chart and said he got 16 boxes, 4 rows of 4 columns on a chart, and he said the items you're picking up at the moment, namely library and a couple of other bits and pieces of highway stuff, grit bins and stuff, that's box right up in the top right hand corner, that's that little box 1/16. He said probably by sometime into the next financial year, in other words after April, you may well be looking at the 4 boxes in that corner, and they may all be coming to you in the not too distant future. And he said after that you may be picking up the 8 boxes in the top half, and at some stage you may pick up all 16 of the items that were listed in those boxes. So it may well be that a lot of these services may well come to us.
Do you know what the items were?
No.
It was a job to read them, wasn't it? Because it was a big room and we
Yeah,
were
there wasn't, yeah.
a long way back.
Yeah, I don't think there was, he hadn't got, he only got things in those small, the other boxes was an unknown, like for the next few years, it would be
Yeah.
whatever they've got to devolve to save money.
Yeah, he didn't know them all, certainly. Councillor Oakes.
How do we justify this to the residents?
The thing is, we've got 2 choices. I mean, we can either pick these things up on behalf of the public and explain to them that it's going to be an additional cost. We're not going to get any money from county because what little they've got, they'll relocate into social services and other things.
Yep.
So we will have to raise more money through our precept. It's a question of whether our public wants these various services, and it's a question of, we've got 2 choices. We can either say we don't want to know, which I think some councils might do on some services. They might cherry pick what they will and won't take, and we could do the same, or it's up to us to pick up the slack.
Yeah, well, the thing here is, though, is that where the hell does this stop? You've mentioned that social services. Well, that's an absolute, well, where the blooming heck do we go with that one?
We won't
And
pick
then-
up that. We won't pick up something like that.
You say we won't.
No, that's a
but-
statutory requirement.
No, it may well be, yeah, but, you know, it might not be next year if somebody ticks a box somewhere. The other thing is things like healthcare, all the other sort of stuff. I mean, this could go mental. Now, the thing is, the government can't get away with this. They're the ones who tax us. We don't really actually tax people even through the precept, really. It just basically pays for the maintenance of the services we provide. But the government are the ones who hammer us with national insurance, you name it. I'm just wondering whether the small boy has got to stand up and shake his fist at these people and say, come on, you're just abrogating responsibility. And that's what I think they actually are doing.
I think that's what Sajid Javed, Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government, is doing right now by putting his team in. He's looking at whether, how this came about, whether anybody's responsible for it, or whether it's,
Okay.
unavoidable. Councillor Peel.
Can I, going on to this, obviously, it looks more and more likely we are going to have quite a few extra services that we're going to do. And going on what we talked about the other night, I know not everybody was here the other night, the amount of increase in the precept would be astronomical at this stage.
It would. Cool.
Isn't it wise that before we actually go with a precept, and I know that the time is really limited now, isn't it wise that we actually go knocking on doors and say, look, this is what the county council are telling us we've got to do. If we do this, this is going to cost you in this town this much extra. I'm not being silly when I say that.
I tend to agree with you. I think we have got to get the public's opinion. I think one answer to that is that we could have a referendum and ask them for their opinion on a referendum. The thing about that is we may get a very low turnout at referendum, and those who come to that vote may not be typical of the whole population's thoughts. Councillor Hutton.
I just wanted to say that my view is that we've got so little information. I don't understand how we can be talking about putting money into budgets when we have absolutely no understanding of what the cost will be and what the implications of the potential changes could be. And, you know, to put some nominal sum for the library, which, you know, which everyone wants to keep, everyone thinks the county should be funding, but to put some nominal sum in there without any clue of what the service would look like if we took it on, any idea of the costs of it, we're just lining ourselves up to get the blame for when it fails. And I just think it's ridiculous. I don't think we should be putting anything into the budget where we don't have a full understanding of the costs. And if that means that the stuff isn't in there for next year, then that's not our responsibility. That's because we don't know the information, because of the way the county council's behaved.
Councillor, I back that up enormously. But I'd also say that the way things are going fundamentally affects our neighbourhood plan. When a blooming hell is the neighbourhood plan going to go if all of a sudden we're going to have to fund this, that and the other, which we don't actually know what it's going to cost, what's going to head our way? I don't wish to be, you know, I'm actually a person who tries to simplify things, not make them more complicated. But, you know, this is a hammering effect on our neighbourhood plan, frankly. I mean, you can forget about any kind of ideas that you might have about development here, there and everywhere, if we're going to get hit with, you know, massive amounts of cost without necessarily the government transferring funds to us to say, yeah, we recognise you're now taking these things on, so we'll give you a few more bob. But they won't. They won't. They'll expect the residents of our town, you know, to pay, put their hands in their pockets and pay because they expect the sort of services that we provide. I'm shaking my head on this one. I
I
really
think
am.
we'll probably come back to this one when we get onto budgets. So I think if we move
Yeah,
on.
but I mean, well, sorry if I'm getting a bit emotional.
Well, we
but it's
strayed a
really
bit from libraries, but I take the
No,
point.
we're not. No, we're not. No, we're not. Libraries are very important.
They're in there. They're one of the things, but we've gone a bit wider than libraries. But
Well, why not?
which doesn't matter too much. But if there's no more on this topic, if we move on for now.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No, that's fine. That's fine. 17201 to receive the clerk's monthly report.
I didn't actually do a written report. As you heard from the Mayor's report, I've been at most of the meetings that he's been at. so that's...
I'm beautifully succinct.
We're a double act.
Yeah, the only extra things that I've got is that I've been
dear.
helping Oundle School with a couple of issues that were raised through comments that we received through the surgeries. And one of them being the zebra crossing outside the school on Milton Road. We met, Richard Tremellon and myself and Sarah Barnwell met to see if some of the ideas that he'd got could be implemented, and she's gone away to speak to the engineers to see if that's the case. And I also have been to the Stronglands flats because there's some issues with trees and bushes and things behind those flats, again to help Richard so that he can sort them out. So that's that. Well done.
Fair enough. Nice chat.
Yes. Very
Okay,
much.
thanks very much, Clark. 173, financial matters. 17301, I'll pass you over to Councillor Glenn for the bank reconciliation, balance sheet, budget report and hub trading account.
Well, we have discussed all this at the finance committee, and we had the pleasure of Paul's company to explain anything we didn't understand, and he was quite helpful, I have to say. So it's all pretty straightforward. We're working within budget. There's various reasons for that. Firstly, we're not spending what we thought we were going to spend. And if you look at the expenditure on Hub and I think on Fletton House, we haven't built what we said we were going to build. So they're not in there. As far as income's concerned, well, it's reasonably healthy. You know, Fletton House is going more or less on budget overall. Courthouse is doing well. The Christmas market did very well, and that is included in these figures, although it doesn't show it in December. Most of it is prepaid in earlier months. The farmers market and a Thursday market are consistently under budget, and they have been under budget for several years, and if anything they're going down, so it's something a problem that's got to be addressed. Yeah, so that's it. We've got more money left than
We've got more money left. We might need it.
yeah.
Sounds like.
Brilliant. Questions?
Got graphs there. Well done.
Okay, so that's the,
Do we have a motion to propose these then? Or,
do I have a proposer to approve the bank reconciliation, balance sheet, budget report and hub trading account?
happy to?
Councillor Fuller,
Yep.
seconded Councillor Oakes.
Thank you.
N. Those in favour?
Yep.
And that's everybody. Okay. 17302, over to Councillor Glenn again for payments for December, which you've got in your pack.
Well, there's nothing very exciting about it. It's the usual suspects. Yeah. What can I say? You know, it's wages and pensions and so on. I suppose the only slightly unusual thing is Hilary Morley, who did our leaflet for QVH, which I assume we've all seen. Haven't you?
I haven't.
It's available. Yes. And
You probably said it.
we had it, we've got it, but we haven't done anything with it.
Oh dear. Right.
So this comes on to another thing which later.
Well,
We've
there's
got-
been
we-
part on the table in the...
I missed that one. I missed that one. So.
Yes, so we've really got to get on with marketing. Flatten the house on this one.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So the proposition, are you going to propose
All right.
that we accept the payments?
I'll propose
Do I
we
have a
accept
seconder? Councillor Fuller, those in favour?
Yep.
And that's unanimous. The next item on the agenda is the budgets. I'll give you a quick run through and then take questions at the end if I may. But I'll just quickly run through the key points really. Last year, the last financial year before this one, the current one, we spent 558,000 and achieved a £20,000 surplus. This year, at the moment, we're projecting about 547,000. So similar sort of amount. We're certainly coming nowhere near the dreaded level 4 and £1 million plus that was predicted a few years back. The budget for next year, there you've got the figures in front of you, but there are some numbers missing out of that, which I can fill in some of the blanks for you. There are a couple of things in here early on brought forward to underpin the budget. This is last year we brought forward reserves of 30,000. That was a figure put in to try and balance the budget, and we also had a response to marketing, which was an expected £15,000 of income that would come in as a result of marketing. Now, we don't feel we need either of those in this year, as we don't need to draw anything from reserves for our to balance our budget. Most of the other figures you've got there, most of them are very similar to the previous year. The two figures you've got, two very important figures on income that you've got missing further down the page are courthouse office space rental and courthouse business stroke office units. Now, together with the three items that are in there for courthouse, with full occupation, which we've now got in courthouse, when everybody's in and everything's caught up, we've got an income in total. The figure that Hanneke gave me was £40,700 of income. Looking further down this, you will see that courthouse expenditure projected for this coming year is 34,000. So we look like we're going to make about a £6,000 surplus in there. This was a building that they were talking about getting rid of at one stage because it was a liability. We're spending money on maintaining it. We're going to spend some money this year in one or two jobs that still need doing. Mainly there's some wooden gates that face onto Mill Road that need replacement, because if you're not careful you could walk through them, they're that rotten. So we're replacing those this year. They're the ones in the big archway.
I thought they'd already been mended by one point.
No, they're absolutely rotten, aren't they?
Push your finger into the woodwork.
You can walk through them. So taking out these three items that we've got in income, and you'll notice that I've been pressing for some time that I think, now I've done these room costs and what each room costs, I've been proposing that estates vote on reducing Chat's rent to a more realistic level. So, I mean, it can always be increased if you don't vote to do this. It just means we've got more income, so it's not a loss, it's not going to be a problem. But for now, I've put in the lower projected figure of £600 as against the £1,000 of last year. You've also got 1435.10 is the museum rent, and 7579 from Charles Wally Associates for the chamber, the old council chamber at Courthouse. Now, making the adjustment for the reduction in the Chat rent, that means those other two numbers that are missing would account for, at full occupation, would account for another 30,686 of additional income. So you've got another 30k more income than this is currently showing. All the other figures are there, and I think they compare favourably with earlier years, which means instead of actually having 190,199.10 of income, we've actually got something like 220, well, very nearly 221,000 of income, which means that 450,000 of projected precept can be reduced. There's another reason why that figure is bigger than previous years. 2 years ago we had 336,000. Last year, or current year, sorry, we've got 395,643 as our precept. There is a figure you'll see that's gone in to expenditure of 44,000 as a sort of ballpark figure for libraries. We've certainly got to talk that one through later on, but that's part of the reason why it's elevated to 450,000, because you've got 44,000 there. That 450 comes down now to about 420 anyway, because of this extra 30k of income that we've got that isn't showing on here. So everything's looking a lot healthier already. So I think what we've done, what we've got here is actually a very good budget. If I move now into expenditure, I've mentioned the 44,000 it's got in for libraries at the moment, and it's actually under library salaries, which if we get them, they won't be anything like 44,000, but it might be other things. It might be actually purchasing the library where we'll be spending the money. I think that's where they'll want us to buy that building, I think. So that's where we'll have to look at it. If we look at the other expenditure items, and we'll come back to these new services that we might pick up from county, there's a figure missing. One of the gaps is a figure for War Memorial. We spent some money last year on getting this War Memorial cleaned, serviced. We had a grant from the War Graves Commission towards it, but we also put some money in, and we won't have to spend that again. It's done. Job's done. It's an excellent job. There's another figure missing under courthouse windows. Why we missed that, I think we were querying how much we spent on windows last year, weren't we? When we were going through budgets, and I think Paul or Hanneke or somebody was going to have a look for the figures and see why the cost was what it was. It looks as though typically we spend about 1,020, something like that. So there's about another 1,000 of expenditure to add for windows at the courthouse, window cleaning. I think it also includes carpet cleaning, as well as window cleaning for that money. No, it's nothing to do with him. Not as far as I know, anyway.
I don't know.
He's nothing to do with it.
It's a total waste of
We've-
money.
Can we not divert, please? Can we stick with the agenda?
No.
The next item where we've got a gap is street furniture. Again, in past years we've had an expenditure. We've not spent a lot on street furniture. If we put a figure in there, typically it's about £250 max. So we're only adding to our expenditure side by £1,250 so far total. And then Fletton House, we've got a figure missing for fees and surveys. I think we put some money in there in the previous financial year for this asbestos survey that turned up. That money was put into the fees, surveys and asbestos removal code at the time, which is why a figure was put in there. I think something went in there perhaps this current year for fees towards the Fletton House extension. But again, I think that can be covered elsewhere. I don't think we need a number in there this year. Fletton House Youth Services, there was a figure in previous years for £6,000, which was the cost of running the youth club. Initially in the Glapthorne room, it outgrew Glapthorne, it went to Queen Victoria Hall, and I was hearing on Friday one of the reasons it collapsed, packed up, was because it got a lot more popular, but I gather parents were having problems that in here, at least they knew where the kids were. Down at Queen Victoria Hall, apparently...
Yeah, they were like just going out.
School were telling us they were finding them all over the place, going around town. It's too convenient for the rest of town for them to be hanging out in all sorts of other places, some of which youngsters shouldn't be. So anyway, that packed up. Unless we want to get that going again, and it will need a councillor, I think, to drive that, like Councillor Murphy was driving it in the early stages, unless anyone's really keen to volunteer. We haven't put that 6,000 back in the budget, but it's something we may be asked about in the future, and it may be a topic for the town meeting. Other missing numbers, hub promotions. There was a figure in for previous years for about £80. This was a loyalty card, and apparently it's been agreed to discontinue the loyalty card in the hub.
I had mine stamped today,
Did you?
so they don't seem to know that.
Well, when your current card runs out, I don't think you'll get a new one.
Oh, we miss a free cup of coffee.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
you can go to Waitrose.
We don't want to send anybody anywhere else, thank you. The next gap was hub clothing. We don't have a uniform in the hub. we just provide aprons. We seem to have enough aprons at the moment. We don't think we need any more this year
No, I
either.
think they wear their own as well.
A lot of them bring their own, they prefer their own, as long as they're not anything too outlandish, we let them wear their own. So we don't need anything in that bit. And the other figure that's missing is hub newspapers. And they were getting quite expensive. We've now decided to still supply some of the magazines and things, a lot of which don't cost us anything, but we won't supply the newspapers. I think we were being asked, could I have a copy of the whichever, I won't name any papers, but they were asking for specific papers, and we were buying quite a lot of newspapers. It was costing us a lot of money, and we didn't feel that it was entirely necessary. People will still come in and have a coffee and read other magazines and other literature that's there if they haven't got newspapers.
If we get them a day old, will you not get them free?
You might well do.
Might do.
You might well
I'll
do.
bang in the Daily Telegraph.
Yeah, we could do that.
Plus the actual,
That, you see, it's a small sale or return.
Sunday Times.
Oh, so they
we'll supply the DT,
You could probably get them from
and
somewhere.
the extra they'll get is I'll actually do the cryptic crosswords, so they can bung it into the prize crossword competition.
They get finished from the end.
One thing on the budget, Hannah mentioned about the QVH painting, the QVH.
Yeah.
Have you put any money in for that, decorating the QVH?
Does it need it?
We haven't done QVH budget. We didn't do it the other day, did we?
No, that's true. did
We
it?
haven't,
Okay,
that's one bit we've
that's
still got
what
to
I
do,
think.
which you'll have to do
Yeah.
on the neighbourhood plan meeting. We'll have to quickly do a Queen Victoria Hall budget, so we haven't got to that bit. The only other figure I've got that's in the wrong place at the moment, it's been in there, but it was in the wrong place. It appeared as hub marketing, I think 15,000. We put a figure of 15,000 in for marketing, various things, marketing us and marketing the town, marketing everything in Oundle. We've spent very little. The only money we've spent to date is for the brochures for Fletton House and Queen Victoria Hall. So we need to be doing more proactive marketing and spending some of that money, and we need to put that money in a budget for next year. It's in, but it's in the wrong place at the moment, under the wrong code. But the 15,000 is in there.
I think he was going to do a new code, wasn't he?
He was
Yeah.
going to create a new one, especially for marketing.
Yeah.
That really takes me through it, with the exception of the new areas and also staffing, which we'll need to just briefly close the meeting for, to discuss. Well, we'll just do quickly the other the libraries and what have you. There's a big load of blank figures here for libraries, and it begins with library wages, vehicles, vehicle tax. That's in case we have to have extra vehicles to do all of this county stuff. Road sweeping, potholes, weeding, spraying, hedges, gritting, salt, grit bins, etc., equipment R&M, and the additional insurance implications, which we can't really ask the insurance company about until we've got an idea of what it's going to cost us. So Paul had put a number in under library of 44,000. That was the figure that currently appears for wages for the current library. I don't think we'll get that bill, because if the library runs as it runs now, we won't have any cost. If county keep it and it stays as it is with them providing the staff, we won't have anything to do. It will just continue to function. If it comes to us, it's likely to be as a community library run by volunteers, with perhaps, like Deeping, one member of staff for something like 24 hours. And it's likely to be somebody, it's going to be costing salary wise about 10 grand, with probably on costs at about 50%. So you're looking at about probably 15,000 for salaries if we have to pick that up, and we don't know whether we would or wouldn't. Where the cost might come is the 240,000, well, 20,000 for the running cost of the library. seems to be an average figure. So we may have to budget for that. And we may have to budget to actually purchase the library. It's 19,500 per year if we lease it off county. We could do better than that if we buy it and we actually own it. The town will own it. We could do it on anything from a 20 to 40 year Public Works Loan Board loan, and the 240,000 valuation. Originally their finger in the air figure was 190. When they've actually had a valuation, it's 240. At 40 years at 3%, I've done some very rough and ready figures. I think that will work out at just under 10 grand a year for capital and interest repayment on that. 20 years it will work out about 15,600, and for 40 years at 3.9%, which is what Paul thinks it might be going to shortly, would be about between 10,500 and 11,000 for the capital plus interest repayment, and at 3.9% over 20 years it could be something like about 17,000.
What was the basis of the valuation? Because that fascinated me. I mean, we managed to get Fletton for 0.
Yeah.
And yet, this library is suddenly, flung up at some, massive amount of. Who's going to buy it?
Full
Somebody
market.
going to live there?
Yeah, full market value, but
Yeah, but what does that mean?
you're quite right in saying
Why someone going to live there?
it's of no value to anybody else other than somebody buying it, knocking it down and building a house, or
This is come on, we'd be held to ransom here again.
well, somebody did build one immediately behind it.
What, the
obviously.
Mason Lodge? He's talking about the old, sorry,
No.
the one behind what? Sorry.
The one behind the library, the other side of our little footpath out here. There's a brand new house built
Oh,
by Simon Roberts.
we know all about that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, another one of those could be built on that site. There's nothing to stop it if they got planning permission.
it's unlikely.
If they get planning.
Unlikely.
Well,
Ooh. But all I'm trying to say is that
Yeah.
when that came through on my email, I really just scratched my chin and went, wait a minute, this is a bit strange.
yeah.
That looks incredibly inflated for what it is.
Yeah.
And I accept entirely that you could flatten it
Yeah.
and rebuild it, but I don't think you get planning permission for that. But anyway,
Probably
there we go.
not, but, it's up to you. What
You're
we
not
do.
sure you agree?
We need-
Oh, that's all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
We need to decide what we're going to do. But those are the kind of figures that we would need to put in a budget if we were attempting to buy that building. That's if we had to. I've heard the comments
So we
earlier
still
on.
can't- We
but-
still can't, as Councillor Hutton said, we still can't actually do a preset based on any figures because we haven't got them.
No. Right.
But what you could, all right, Councillor Hutton, yeah.
Well, my position is I'm not going to support any increase in the precepts based on, we've got a proposed budget that's full of holes, no costings for any of the new services, we've got no understanding of what it would cost to run the library. The only thing we can do is set a budget based on what we know, which is basically last year's costs, and that's the only thing I'm going to support.
When you say last year's costs for the other services we currently provide.
Yeah, exactly.
So what you're suggesting is this council says no to the library and no
I'm
to...
not saying no to the library, I'm saying I'm not prepared to support a budget where there's no numbers in it.
Well,
We don't have
the alternative to that, the alternative to that is that we then run a deficit. I mean, if we end up getting the library and the highway stuff, all we can do is take money out of reserves if we haven't put a budget figure in. It's up to you. I mean, we can do that. We can also put a budget figure in, and even if it means we make a surplus and we transfer money to reserves and we give it back to the public at the end of the year in the form of a lower precept next year. Councillor Chappell.
I'm about to say it's a bit complicated, but one of the basic tenets of trying to negotiate anything is that you don't go there with all your cards showing from day one.
No.
And to some extent, putting any figures arguably into the budget that are predicated on the cost of acquiring the library building, for example, promptly indicates an intention to pay their price.
That's what I think.
Yeah,
I tend to agree that when the time comes, if it comes, we will want our own valuer to go and give us a valuation, and any offer will be based on that, not on a figure that the county council come up with. But I think we do need to have money built into budget to deal with the possible things that we may choose as a council at a future point, because we're not choosing today to do. And one way of getting around those two dilemmas is to put a significant figure in and simply call it contingencies,
Yeah.
because that's what it is.
yeah.
And then where we spend it doesn't matter, in the sense that if it's budgeted for one thing and we want to spend it somewhere else, we've got to go through a few hoops to, in a sense, authorise that use. Whereas if you simply pull it from the figure that is contingency, then you're pulling it from the figure that's contingency. If we don't use it, stroke don't use all of it, it could go into reserves. But bear in mind that I think we're going to have to look critically at the budget, because the budget should provide for 3 months running costs as being in reserve. And if our running costs are going up, the amount of our reserves will have to go up to reflect that. I'm not sure it happens with the way this is configured. It seems to me that if you're talking about a situation where currently staffing costs on the library are said to be 44,000 or thereabouts, running costs roughly 20, and possibly acquisition costs through a loan look to be about 10. Since I have no doubt that if we took it over we wouldn't staff it in quite the same way, it might be reasonable to think in terms of that figure being roughly half of where it is. And all of a sudden you start thinking, well, it's 20, 20-ish and 10, which seems to me to be suggesting a figure of roughly £50,000, or anywhere between 50 and 60. You've got figures for possible highways costs as well, which we don't know. So arguably, adding X for that unclear amount, but again bung it into contingencies. Experience tells us there will always be the unexpected that we haven't put in the budget. Something goes wrong with one of our buildings, maybe some opportunity comes up. To have a contingency budget, which we've had in the past, then dumped in the past, then had back, may give us flexibility. And the town will probably forgive us if we are simply saying at this stage, it is to make it possible to do it. If we don't do it, the money will be in reserves, which may enable us to either peg or even reduce precepts in a future year, depending on where we are. And so I would certainly be supporting putting in a figure, as long as we call it a contingency figure, and arguably not the way it is now. And I'm anxious to finish, but just before Councillor Oates perhaps comes in, just on another tack, and it's a pet subject of mine. Local organisations are going to find it even tougher than ever to find funding from anywhere but us. We had a £6,000 figure in our budget for the youth club, which we haven't spent, which to all intents and purposes was a grant. And rather than simply taking the figure out altogether, my view is that we should put the money into grants. It doesn't again mean we have to spend it, but at least if it's there we can. And keeping an eye on what you said earlier about the need to ensure that if and when capping comes, we've got an appropriate budget. I would rather not start paring things out at this stage that we might regret paring out at a later time. And so for me, I'd rather keep that figure in, build it into grants, and if we spend it, we spend it. If we don't, we don't. And I'll stop at that point because I'm sure others are anxious to contribute.
Sorry, do you?
That's okay, I was just going to say, that, look, that's what the other town councils have done. They've literally put a a figure in.
Okay.
for
So we're not-
contingency.
Grouped it all together and called it contingency.
Yeah.
Right, look, this is my a simple observation. I mean, all we're doing actually, or would be doing, and I support Councillor Chapel's view, is we're doing exactly the same thing as the government do. Now, what we do with our budgeting principle is we hypothecate things. We allocate funds through the PSET to do certain things. Now, what we're doing, if we just add in the contingency bit, is we say there's a splurge of money and we can spend it in whichever way we like. So, if you go down and you fill your car up with petrol, that doesn't necessarily make the roads any better, because that maybe goes somewhere else, because basically it just goes into some big bucket and it comes out and the government spends it how it likes. Now, I quite like the idea, so why don't we just have a budget that's totally a contingency, and we'll decide on a day-to-day basis as to where it goes. Now, that to me is hugely ironic. Here we are, we're trying ever so hard, to do things properly, but yeah, let's do that. Mr. Slush Fund, come on, let's put 50 grand in the slush fund, and let's wake up in the morning and think, oh, that's a good idea, we'll stick that over there. Oh dear, am I losing the will to live here? I think so.
Councillor Fuller.
It's fascinating, actually. I just think that we have to be prepared, and we need to have that preparation, and I think we can justify it to people, and it gives us that flexibility, which I like. So I think it's a very good proposition.
Can I just say, I did say I do support.
So how much do you want to put in as a contingency for all these?
5-0.
Oh,
Well, actually, I'm going to say 60.
No, it's doing this.
I think 50 is probably around the bottom end of the library, potentially.
oh, go on.
And if you add in 10 for highways and sort of odds and sods, it's exactly that. And I totally appreciate why Councillor Hutton is so unhappy with it. It is not the way I would like to do my budgeting.
No,
I agree.
it's not the way any
It's
of
an
us want.
exceptional situation that is not of our choosing, but the problem is if it ain't there, we never will have the opportunity to do it. And we may have to be talking to the town about how come we managed to let the library service go completely.
And the
I'd
other
rather
issue,
not be in that position. I'd rather be, hopefully, in a position to make that choice when the time comes. And yes, we could still be wrong.
yeah,
That figure that I sort of roughly conjured together, picking up on the figures that have been bandied around, we may still be out with. The other point is, however, if in doing all of that sum, we also ensure that our budget creates a reserve of 3 months' worth of expenditure.
which
I
is,
think at the moment we predicate that on around £75,000, but that's only 25 grand a month. I don't think that's enough. If that reserve goes up, it becomes a form of contingency fund in itself, because that's what reserves are there for, to be drawn upon if.
yeah.
That's fair.
The other thing we've also got to look at is the possibility of being capped.
3 years. 3 years.
I mean, I don't know where that date comes from, and I have to say that if you start
I
thinking
don't know
when the next general election is likely to be, it's about
Right.
3 years' time, and you start thinking, well, maybe they're going to have slightly bigger issues going on in town parish councils.
My issue, frankly, is just explaining all this stuff to the residents. Because they're going to get a whacking great increase in the precincts if we do this.
All right, it's not the job of the deputy chair of the planning committee.
Oh, right,
The other
okay.
side of the table, who might pick up the poison.
So it's got big shoulders.
Oh, blimey.
Right, so do I have a proposition then to put 60,000 in, or do I have another figure?
That's my proposition.
I'm seconding it.
Those in favour of making
I'm
that
in there.
proposition?
Yep.
Anybody against? One against? Those abstaining? One abstention. Okay, we're going to have to close the doors.
I'd rather run a deficit if we need to. We might have money, we'll put it 200,000, 300,000.
have a proposition before we shut the door? If we're going to go into private session, why don't we do the wording before we close the door?
It could be anything, isn't it?
We,
When we're going into a closed session,
Yes.
we need a proposition before we shut the door.
Yeah.
That we go into
I'm not
closed
with
session.
everybody either.
right, yeah, okay, yes, I'm with you. Sorry, I was, yeah, sorry, I thought you were saying something else. I was kind of caught up in this conversation over here.
I thought we were doing that later, or doing things like that later.
Right, let me find the wording. Please note that in view of the special and/or confidential nature of the business about to be transacted, it is advisable in the public interest that the public be temporarily excluded and they are instructed to withdraw our Standing Order 3C. If we can just close the doors.
If that's a proposition, I'll second it.
We've just gone through those.
Yes, okay, so
Yeah,
it's
it'll be-
proposed.
Have
Right.
you hopped over?
If you proposed it,
I've proposed it.
I second it.
Councillor Chappell has
We're
seconded
all
it.
in.
Okay.
Those in favour?
is that everybody?
Well, I
Is that everybody?
Is everybody in favour? No.
No, those against? Any abstentions? We got one. Are you in favour of closing the session? Yes. So we have one against and no abstentions. Okay, yeah,
No,
Still
vote.
on financial matters.
yeah. We've taken a long while tonight and we started late.
I can see the exit.
So right, if the clerk would read me the propositions that we've made in closed session.
It was agreed that the hub staff be paid the national living wage.
And the
Opposed.
proposed by Councillor Peel, seconded Councillor Chappell. Those in favour?
Five.
Sorry.
Against.
I did, sorry.
Those against? There were 3 against, weren't there?
And one abstention.
Yep.
The second proposal,
To approve the salary budget for 2018/19.
proposed Councillor Peel, seconded Councillor Chappell. Those in favour? Those against? None. One abstention. Okay, so moving on, 17304, to note the appointment of PKF Littlejohn LLP as external auditors for 2017 to 2022. There's nothing to do there other than note that they are the new external auditors for the council. 17401, planning matters, to receive the minutes from the planning committee meeting held on the 2nd of January. And unless Councillor Chappell has any strong...
I have no strong desire to say anything unless somebody asks me a question arising out of what they've read.
So I think we can take it that we received the minutes and we can move on. Estate matters, 17501, estate matters, to agree to suspend the Estates Management Committee and address all estates matters in full council meetings. That's because the head of estates, Councillor Glenn, is going to be away for the next couple of meetings. So while that situation persists and we're struggling for quorum at some of these meetings, that we actually bring the estates matters, we'll have to have one this month,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
next month for February, March, you'll be back for April. We can probably resume
It's
back
whether
to
you
normal.
want to resume in April or whether you just wait until we start the council year off again in May.
Oh,
Entirely up to you.
I'll be back in April if you want me to be there, I'll be there.
Well,
Okay.
the financial year begins in April, doesn't it? So,
Yeah, but like your council year.
Yeah. yeah,
Which is when you pick all your committees and things.
yeah, when we have new heads of departments, yeah. So we could do it until either of those.
Yeah.
But do I have a proposer to...
I mean, just before we do it,
Go on.
I'm not against it. I was against it until I understood the reasons why, because I was rather worried about it. But just looking at it pragmatically, currently, we have a full council meeting on the first Tuesday of each month, which is said to be a sort of extraordinary neighbourhood plan meeting on which occasionally we tack other things. We would be better to deal with estates then, tack them all into full council meetings, because if we're not careful, we'll be having full council meetings finishing gone 10 o'clock at night. If you're going to try and pack that lot in as well, it's still not going to be straightforward to not have a dedicated night for it.
No.
Because we've only really got an hour to start planning. I don't think we can really start planning any later than 8 o'clock.
You wouldn't get estates all in.
No.
You wouldn't do.
Probably split it.
You wouldn't do neighbourhood plan and estates in an hour. You would not do
have
it.
that much to do on neighbourhood plan at times. And perhaps not arguably not that much over the next couple of months, which is the period we're talking about. I mean, this isn't a long-term arrangement, as I understand it. So I would have thought the chances are we get most of it done in that meeting, and if it doesn't, yes, I agree, it'll have to roll on. But what I don't really want to see is an hour and a half's worth of estate matters tacked on to an hour and a half to 2 hours worth of a full meeting, because otherwise we're going to be here to God knows what.
So it may be that we have to start at 7 on a full council. On the third week of each month, start at 7 instead of 7:30. Will give us an extra half an hour.
We could still have a maximum meeting of 2.5 hours in the standing orders, so
The standard order said they start at 7:30, so if we're going to abandon one bit, we can abandon the other bit.
We've got 25 minutes left.
Yeah. So, do we have a proposer to suspend estates and move them into full council, whichever one it is? Got a proposer from Councillor Chester, second to Councillor Fuller. Those in favour?
Reluctantly.
Those against?
Can you record reluctantly?
Those abstaining?
I'll say.
3 abstentions. Okay, correspondence for action, we have nothing. Correspondence for information, this is information only, 17701, a letter from first responders regarding attendance at Christmas market.
yeah, I think I'll
It's
go
in your
to
pack.
everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, you've all seen it.
Yeah.
17702, letter from resident regarding transfer of services from NCC to Oundle Town Council.
Seen that?
Are we going to respond to it in any particular way? I don't think we've got time to discuss how we respond
No.
to it, because it raises a lot of issues, but
Certainly does.
we've only got 2 choices. One is to say it was tabled and all councillors have had a chance to read it, and the other is to actually respond to some of it.
I would just say thank you very much for your letter, we'll respond in
Yeah.
the future.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Add it to the neighbourhood plan meeting.
That's it, a holding. I think they call it a holding.
Yes. Then we move into, please note that in view of the special and/or confidential nature of the business about to be transacted, it is advisable in the public interest that the public be temporarily excluded and they are instructed to withdraw. Our standing order 3C.
Seconded, if you like.
Are you proposing that?
Proposer, Councillor Chappell,
Right.
seconder, Councillor Fuller. Those in favour? Right, now it goes up.
Is everybody, sorry, did you put your hand up or not?
Oh, we will leave in the room.
No,
Those in
You
favour?
didn't, right, so I've got one, are you one
Those
against?
against?
one against.
Those abstaining? Right, it's just one against. Okay,
Hang on a minute. Sorry.
close. We're back in open session. I'd just like to say that under finance and personnel matters, we have received 2 updates which have been noted. And I now move on to the last item on the agenda, item 179. I'll go round the room asking any other relevant matters, report only, not propositions. Councillor Peel.
No.
Councillor Hutton. Councillor Neville Oakes. Councillor Sue Oakes. Councillor Chappell.
As you come into Oundle from Batford, people have noticed, on the sign that's erected, you've got the Oundle sign, and underneath it you've got about 3 or 4 other things.
Yeah.
The bottom one is now, and has been for a little
45
while,
degrees.
a rather peculiar angle. It could sort of not be or somebody got there and fix it.
Go out with a hammer.
I think somebody has fixed it a couple of times and it keeps falling down again. Councillor Fuller. Councillor Chesser.
In view of the fact that there was yet another smash and grab raid in Handle yesterday, was it yesterday? Day before?
Early hours
Tuesday AM.
Sunday morning, yeah.
I'm wondering whether we shouldn't try and thin out or prune or something the very lovely tree which is actually obstructing a lot of the view of what's going on.
CCTV.
From the CCTV
Mhm,
camera.
okay.
I think it would make it a lot more efficient. The
Hairdressers,
hairdressers.
yeah.
What, designers?
Oh, Neil's here.
Oh, Chris! Oh dear! Oh! Well,
Yes.
Councillor Glenn, anything from you? No, nothing from me. I'll close the meeting at 10:03.
Oh, Mr. Happy's happy now.